I have spent my whole life building things meant to outlast me. That is what a stonemason does. You set stone, and stone does not care about your lifetime. A dry-laid wall I built as a young man will be standing, straight and true, 200 years after the last person who knew my name is gone. Because I set each stone to carry the weight of the ones above it, locked, so that the wall grows stronger under its own load instead of weaker. I have laid foundations for houses I will never live in, for families not yet born, and walked away knowing the footing was sound, that whatever they build on it will stand, because I set the base right. That is the whole quiet pride of the trade. You build shelter for people who come after you. You make a thing that holds when you are no longer there to hold it up. People think a stone wall is just stones piled up, and it is the opposite of that. A dry-laid wall has no mortar, nothing gluing it together, and yet a good one will outlast a concrete one by centuries, and the reason is the setting. Every stone has to be chosen and turned and fitted so it sits dead solid on the ones below and gives a flat bed to the ones above. And the great secret of it, the thing my father drilled into me with a cuffed ear when I was a boy, is that you set one stone to cover two, and two to cover one. So the joints never line up. So there is no straight crack for the weight or the frost to drive down through. Done right, the load of the wall locks it tighter the heavier it gets. It is the closest thing to permanence that working hands can make. I have stood at walls my great-grandfather laid and put my hand on stone he set and felt him there. A man dead 100 years, still holding the hill together. That is what I gave my life to. Not money, things that hold. And I tell you all of this about stone because you cannot understand what I did for Toby, or what was nearly done to him, unless you understand that I have only ever known one way to love anything, which is to build it a shelter that will stand after I am gone. And the one time in my life it mattered most, the one wall I needed more than any other to stand after I was gone, I nearly handed the building of it to the very person who meant to knock it down. My name is Cyrus Penhall. I am 73 years old, and I have laid stone in the hills of New Hampshire my whole life. The way my father did, and his father, who came from Cornwall with a set of stone tools and the oldest building craft there is. I want to tell this slow, the way you raise a good wall, one set stone at a time. Because what nearly came down was not a house and not a wall. It was the future of the one person in this world I love most and worry over most. And the hands that nearly toppled it were hands I had trusted to hold it up. Let me set the footing first, so you understand what was being protected. I built a good life out of stone. 40-some years of walls and foundations and chimneys and the patient stonework that lasts. And by the end I owned my company and my land and my house, which I built myself. A low, strong stone house on a hill that will be standing when this whole valley is forgotten. I married a woman named Vera, who was the better part of me, and we had one son. And that son grew up and married and had a boy, and then, when that boy was 4 years old, my son and his wife were killed on an icy road one February night. And everything I had built my life to be changed in a single phone call. The boy was Toby, my grandson. He has Down syndrome, and he was 4 years old and suddenly had no mother and no father. And Vera and I did the only thing there was to do, which was the same thing my family has always done. The thing I had spent my whole life doing with stone. We built him a shelter. We took him in, and we raised him. And when Vera passed 8 years ago, I raised him on a loan. And I want to be very clear with you about something, because the whole of this story turns on it. Raising Toby was not a burden I carried. It was the great gift of my old age. Vera and I were past 50 when Toby came to us, an age when most people are putting the hard work of raising children behind them. And we did not hesitate for a single day, and we never once regretted it. We learned everything new. We learned what Toby needed and how he learned, and what frightened him and what delighted him. And we built our whole lives around making sure that little boy, who had lost his mother and father in one night, would never doubt for 1 second that he was wanted. Vera was a wonder at it. She had a patience I never had, and she taught me to slow down, to meet the boy where he was instead of dragging him to where I thought he ought to be. The years we raised Toby were the happiest years of our marriage, and when Vera got sick, near the end, the thing she made me promise, the only thing, holding my hand, was that I would make sure Toby was always safe. Always. No matter what. I promised her. I have kept a great many promises in my life, made of stone, that will stand for centuries. That was the one I meant to keep above all the others. And it was that promise that Sondra, without ever knowing it, set herself against. Let me tell you about my grandson, because a man tried to treat him as a thing, and I will not have him be a thing in my own telling of it. Toby is 24 now. He works at the hardware store on the main street of our town, and he has worked there 6 years, and he is better at it than anyone they have ever had, because he has memorized where every single item in that store lives, every bolt and every washer and every kind of screw. And he greets every customer by name and remembers what they came in for last time and asks after their dog. People come into that store on bad days just to be greeted by Toby, because he is glad to see you in a way most grown people have forgotten how to be. He is funny. He is stubborn about his routines and generous with everyone he meets. He loves trains and bad weather and a particular diner pie. He is, in every way that the word actually means, a whole and complete person, with a life he built and people who love him. And the fact that he does some things differently than I do takes nothing from that. And I had spent 20 years making sure the world saw the person and not just the diagnosis. Let me give you one thing, so he is real to you. The winter Vera died, I was no good to anyone, I will admit it. I went somewhere dark inside myself and could not climb out. And it was Toby, 16 years old then, who got me up. Every morning he would come and stand in my doorway and say, "Grandpa, it's a work day. People are waiting on us." And he would not leave until I got up, because in his mind, a day had a shape and you owed it to people to show up for it. And he was not going to let me quit on the day or on him. He carried me through that winter. The boy the world looks at and decides needs taking care of carried a grown man through the worst grief of his life, on nothing but stubbornness and love and a certainty that you show up. So when somebody later tried to tell me Toby was a burden I was too old to carry, I knew the truth, which is that the carrying in our house had always gone both ways, and more than once it was the old mason leaning on the boy. That is the boy whose future was at stake. Not a sum of money, a person. Remember that, because the one who betrayed us could not. There is a thing that haunts an old man raising a boy like Toby. It is not the daily work, which is joy. It is the one question that sits on your chest at 3 in the morning and will not move. Who holds the wall up after I am gone? I am 73. Toby will, God willing, live a long, full life, and he will need someone in his corner for all of it. Someone to manage his affairs and watch his money, and make sure no one ever takes advantage of his trusting heart, because he trusts everyone. That is the most beautiful and most dangerous thing about him. So I did what I have done my whole life. I tried to build a structure that would stand after me. I sold my company, and I put nearly everything I had into a trust for Toby. Enough to keep him cared for and safe and comfortable for the rest of his days. And I named a guardian and trustee to manage it and to look after him when I no longer could. I named my niece, Sondra. Sondra is my late brother Edwin's daughter, my only close family left besides Toby. She is 46, and she came back into our lives some years ago after Edwin died, and she made herself useful, and she made herself close. She would come up to the house, she would take an interest in Toby. She would tell me how she worried about what would happen to him when I was gone, how she wanted to help carry it, how family had to look after family. And I, an aging man kept awake by that very 3 in the morning question, heard exactly what I was desperate to hear, which was that there would be someone, that the wall would not fall when I did, that my brother's daughter would stand where I had stood. I made her Toby's guardian-to-be and the trustee of everything I had set aside for him. I handed her the most precious thing I have ever built. I trusted her with it the way I trust a foundation I set myself. That trust was the crack she worked into, patiently, the way water works into stone. What I did not see, because I did not want to see it, because a man desperate for someone to carry his burden does not inspect the shoulders too closely, was that Sondra was in trouble. Money trouble. The deep kind. The kind people hide. And sitting right there, under her control, was a trust fund built to last a disabled man 50 years. To Sondra, I would come to understand that was not Toby's future. It was a problem solved. She moved slowly, the way the smart ones do. First, she made herself the manager of everything, relieving the tired old man, taking the paperwork off my hands, so kind, so capable. Then, little by little, she began to take Toby's care out of my hands too, and to take me out of Toby's, telling me I was getting old, that the responsibility was too much for me now, that she was only trying to help me rest. It was so gradual I could not have pointed to the day it changed. It was a casserole brought up on a Sunday, and then a standing Sunday visit, and then her offering to drive Toby to his appointments, and then her sitting in on them, and then the appointments being scheduled without telling me at all. It was her gently suggesting that maybe Toby was getting to be too much for me on the bad days, planting the seed, watering it, week after week. She would say a thing like, "You do so much, Cyrus. You shouldn't have to," in a voice so warm you could not hear the knife in it, and a tired old man heard only the warmth, because the warmth was what I was starving for. She made herself indispensable, and then she made me feel incapable. And she did it so slowly and so lovingly that by the time she started talking about facilities, she had already spent 2 years arranging the board so that the obvious next move was the one she wanted. That is how the patient ones do it. They do not knock your wall down. They get you to hand them the stones, one at a time, thanking them for the help, until there is nothing left holding but their hand. And then they open it. And then she began, in that same soft, worried voice, to talk about Toby's future in a new way. She started saying that I could not give Toby what he needed anymore, that a man my age could not properly care for someone like Toby, that there were places, good places, she said, facilities, designed for people like him, where he would be looked after by professionals, where it would all be so much easier on everyone. She had even found one, a place several states away. She spoke of it as a kindness. And the money in the trust, she had begun, quietly, to spend. Not on Toby. I would learn the full shape of it later. The withdrawals, the fees she paid herself, the things that had nothing to do with my grandson, the slow, steady draining of the wall I had built around him, stone by stone, into her own pockets. But what nearly destroyed me, I have to be honest about, because it is the heart of the near miss. For a while, she almost had me. Because she was attacking me at the exact place I was weakest, which was my fear, I was 73 and tired and afraid of dying before Toby was safe. And here was a younger person, family, telling me in a gentle voice that I was no longer enough, that the loving thing, the responsible thing, was to let go, to let the professionals take him, to stop being a stubborn old man clinging to a boy he could no longer properly serve. And some nights I believed her. Some nights I lay awake and thought, maybe she is right. Maybe I am being selfish keeping him. Maybe a place with young, strong staff and nurses is better than an old man who might drop dead in the night and leave him alone in this house. I came close, I will tell you plainly, to signing the full guardianship over to her then and there, to stepping back, to letting her move Toby to that place several states away, because she had convinced me it was what a good grandfather would do. She had taken my deepest love, my fear for him, and turned it into the very lever to pry him out of my arms. That is the cruelest thing I have ever had done to me, and it was very nearly the end of the whole story, with no reversal at all. Just an old man talked into surrendering the one wall he most needed to defend. I need you to understand how that fear works, because it is the trap, and it can catch any of us. When you love someone who will need protecting after you are gone, and you are old, your whole heart becomes a single open wound named, "What happens to him without me?" You lie awake doing the arithmetic of your own mortality against his needs, and a person who wants to take from you learns to press exactly there, on that one wound, and call it concern. Every time Sondra said I was getting too old, she was not lying. That was the devil of it. I am getting old, that is true. And a true thing aimed at your deepest fear cuts deeper than any lie. I started to doubt my own hands, my own judgment, the soundness of the one structure I cared about most. A mason who starts to doubt his own footing will tear down a wall that was perfectly sound. And I came within a signature of doing exactly that. Of pulling down the shelter I had built around Toby with my own hands, because the person who wanted it gone had convinced me it was already failing. The most dangerous lie is never the one about your enemy. It is the one about yourself. What stopped me was Toby himself, and it was the smallest thing. He did not want to go. He could not have told you about trusts or guardianship, but he understood. The way he understands the things that matter. That someone was talking about sending him away from his store, and his town, and his grandfather, and his diner pie, and his whole life. And one evening, he came and sat with me and said, in his way, "Grandpa, I don't want to go to the new place. I want to stay here with you. This is my home." And he was not confused, and he was not incapable. He was a grown man telling me clearly what he wanted for his own life. And I had been so deep in my fear that I had nearly failed to ask him. And I looked at my grandson, at this whole entire person asking to stay in the home we had built. And the fog of Sondra's gentle voice burned off all at once. And I became, again, what I have always been, which is a man who finds out whether a foundation is sound before he builds on it. So I stopped being a frightened old man and went back to being a mason, which means a man who checks the footing himself before he trusts it with any weight at all. I did it carefully and quietly. The way you take apart a wall you mean to find the fault in. I had set up the trust. I had every right to see its books, and I exercised it, going around Sondra to the bank and the records directly. And there it was, laid out, cold. The withdrawals, the fees she had paid herself, the money that had left Toby's future and gone into Sondra's debts, month after month, a steady bleed. I found the paperwork on the facility several states away, and I made some calls about it. And it was not the good place she described. It was a cheap warehouse for people the world wanted to forget. A place she had chosen not because it was good for Toby, but because it was far, and it was cheap, and it would leave the most money in the trust for her to drain, once the inconvenient grandfather was out of the picture. I drove out to look at it myself, the place she had spoken of so warmly. I did not tell her. I just got in the truck and drove the better part of a day, and I stood in the parking lot of it. And I did not even need to go inside, because you can read a building the way I read stone. And this one told me everything. It was a place built to store people, not to shelter them. The kind of place where a man like Toby would sit in a day room in front of a television, with the sound off, and slowly stop being himself. Far from his store and his town, and the only people on earth who knew his name and his routines and his pie. She had stood in my kitchen and described that place as a kindness. And I understood, standing in that parking lot, that I was not dealing with a niece who had gotten in over her head and made some bad choices. I was dealing with a person who could look at Toby, who got me up every morning the winter Vera died, and see a thing to be filed away cheaply so she could spend his money. The drive home was the longest of my life, and somewhere on it, the fear finally turned into something a great deal more useful, which was the cold, steady purpose of a man who has finally seen the fault in the wall and knows exactly which stone to pull. She had a plan, and the plan was to put a whole, beloved, living person in a box several states away and spend the money meant to protect him on herself, and to do it all wearing the face of the caring niece. I took it to a lawyer, one who knew this kind of law, the law that exists to protect vulnerable people from exactly this. And she told me what I had hoped to hear: a trustee who steals from the beneficiary, who uses a disabled man's trust for her own debts, has not just behaved badly, she has destroyed her own standing completely. The law removes such a person, claws back what she took, and bars her from ever holding such a position again. Because the whole purpose of that law is to be the shelter over people who cannot always shelter themselves. The structure I had built had a flaw, which was Sondra, and the law gave me the tools to tear that flaw out and rebuild the wall sound. So I built the real wall, the one that would actually stand, before I ever confronted her. I worked with the lawyer to set up a proper special needs trust, the right kind, with a reputable independent trustee that answers to oversight and cannot drain a dime into its own pocket, with a detailed plan for Toby's care written into stone. And for the human part, the part that matters more than any document, I did the thing a mason knows, which is that no single stone holds a wall. They hold each other. I went to the people who love Toby: Ray, who owns the hardware store and thinks of Toby as his own; Toby's co-workers; the diner; half the town, honestly. Because Toby is beloved in a way I had maybe not fully reckoned until I started asking. And I built a circle of them, named backup guardians, and a community around him, so that the wall around my grandson would not be one stone, one fragile old man or one treacherous niece, but a whole locked course of people, each carrying part of the weight so that no single failure could ever bring it down again. When I went to Ray and told him the bones of it, that old man put down the wrench he was holding and had to step into the back room for a minute before he could speak. And when he came back out, he said, "You tell me what you need, Cyrus. That boy is family to this whole store." And it was like that everywhere I went. The waitress at the diner who knows Toby's order before he sits down. The man who drives the route Toby takes home and keeps an eye without being asked. The young woman at the library who saves the train books for him. I had spent 20 years thinking I was the only wall standing between Toby and a world that might not be kind. The lone old stone holding up the whole weight. And what I learned, going door to door in my own town, was that I had never been alone at all. That a whole community had quietly set itself around my grandson over the years, loving him. And all I had to do was ask them to make it formal, to lock the course. That is the thing Sondra never understood, because she does not think in those terms. She thought she only had to get past one tired old man. She did not know she was up against a whole town that had decided, without ever holding a meeting about it, that Toby Penhall was one of theirs. That is how you build something that lasts. Not one strong stone, many, set to hold each other. And only when the new wall stood, only when Toby was already safe inside it, did I deal with the one who had tried to take him. I asked Sondra to come up to the house, the stone house on the hill that I built with my own hands. And I asked the lawyer to be there, and Ray, and a woman from the office that oversees guardians in our state. And I had all of it ready. The books, the withdrawals, the truth about the facility. Sondra came in still wearing the caring face, ready, I suppose, to walk the tired old man further towards signing Toby away. And I let her sit in the house I built to shelter my family. And I did not start with the books or the law. I started with my brother. I had chosen the house on purpose, The way I chose the greenhouse for nothing, except this was not a greenhouse. It was the thing I am proudest of building. A low stone house I raised myself over 3 summers. Walls 2 feet thick, set to stand through any winter this hard country can throw. I wanted Sondra to have to do her talking inside the most solid thing I ever made. A house built to shelter the people I love, while she explained why she had tried to put one of them in a warehouse. Toby was not there. I had made sure of that. He was at the store with Ray's wife keeping an eye, because some walls you build so that the person inside them never has to know how close the storm came. So it was just the grown-ups, in the front room, with the late afternoon light coming low through the deep windows, and the woman from the state with her quiet folder, and Ray standing by the cold hearth with his arms crossed and his jaw set, and the lawyer, and me, and Sondra in the good chair. And I let the solidness of that house press in on her a while before I said a word. I told her I had loved Edwin, and that when she came back into our lives, I had seen my brother in her and let that open my door and my trust, and that I had handed her the single most precious thing I had ever built, the future of a boy who trusts everyone, and that she had looked at that boy and at the money meant to keep him safe, and she had chosen the money. And I watched it land on her. And I will tell you what she said, because it told me everything about how a person does a thing like this. She did not fall apart. She got defensive. And then, when she saw I had it all, she got cold. And what came out of her was the thing I will never forget. She said, in a hard, flat voice, "It is not as if he even understands any of it, Cyrus. He doesn't know what money is. He'd be looked after either way. What does it matter to him?" And there it was. There was the whole black root of it. She had been able to do all of it, the draining and the scheming and the warehouse several states away, for one reason. She did not see Toby as a person. To her, he was a thing that came attached to a sum of money. An obstacle that did not really feel or understand or count. And so taking from him was not really taking from anyone. She said it in a room that contained Ray, who has watched Toby greet 1,000 customers by name, and the lawyer, and me. And she could not understand why we were all looking at her the way you look at something that has crawled out from under a stone. Because she genuinely did not grasp that the person she had dismissed was more real and more loved than she had ever managed to be. I let the cold part land then. With her own father's name still in the air, I told her she was removed, that the trust was already moved beyond her reach into a structure she could never touch, that Toby was already protected by people who actually loved him, and that every dollar she had taken would be clawed back to the last cent. And I told her that the woman from the state, sitting right there, now had the complete record of what she had done, and that the law that protects people like Toby was going to run its course. Not because I was hungry for her ruin, but because there will be other Tobys, other trusting souls, and a person who has done this once cannot be allowed near the next one. She did not get to be a danger to anyone else's grandson. That much I owed to people I will never meet. She left my house without the money and without the boy, and without, I think, ever once understanding what she had actually tried to steal, which was not a sum in a trust account, but a human being's whole life. And here is the part where I show you the difference between me and her, because it is the only part that finally let me sleep again. I could have gone further. The lawyer told me I could pursue Sondra for everything, press the hardest version of every charge, hound her through the courts for years, make sure she ended with nothing, and worse than nothing. There was a stretch of nights when I understood the full, cold shape of what she had meant to do to Toby, when I wanted to bring a wall down on her with my own 2 hands. But I am 73 years old, and I have a grandson at home who wants to go to the diner for pie, and a finite number of mornings left to take him. And I was not going to spend a single one of those mornings building Sondra a grave instead of building Toby a life. I gave the authorities what protecting the next vulnerable soul required, and I clawed back every cent for Toby. And then I let her go out of my life entirely. Because a wall that stands does not need to crush the man who pushed at it. It just needs to hold. And mine holds now. That was all I ever needed it to do. The first night after it was all done, after the new trust was sealed and the circle was set, and Sondra was gone for good, I slept all the way through till morning, for the first time in longer than I could remember. No 3 in the morning questions sitting on my chest, because for the first time since Vera died, I knew the answer to it. Someone holds the wall after I'm gone. Many someones, locked in a course. I went and stood in Toby's doorway that morning the way he used to stand in mine, and I watched him sleep a minute. And I told Vera, out loud, in the quiet house we built, that I had kept the promise, that the boy was safe, that he would always be safe now, no matter what, the way she made me swear. It is the only time in this whole hard business that I let myself weep, and they were not bitter tears. Toby is home, where he wanted to be. He is at the hardware store this morning, greeting people by name, asking after their dogs, exactly where he belongs. The trust is sound and watched over by people who answer to other people, and there is a whole town locked in a course around him now, so that when I am gone, and I will be gone, the wall I spent my old age building will still be standing, holding his weight the way I set it to. He does not know any of what almost happened, and he never will, and that, too, is a kind of shelter, the best one I ever built. They thought the easiest thing in the world was to take from a man who could not count the cost, watched over only by a grandfather too old to stop them. They forgot that I have spent my whole life building things to stand after I am gone, and that the strongest wall is never one stone. It is many, set to carry each other, so that no single hand can ever pull it down. They thought they were prying loose one tired old stone and would have the whole thing. They never saw the course of people locked in behind me, or understood that a man who has spent 50 years learning how weight is truly carried does not build his most important wall to depend on himself alone. I built him that wall. It will hold. And on the day I am no longer here to lay another stone, my grandson will still be standing safe inside the one thing his old grandfather knew, past all doubt: how to build.